Legends of Runeterra is a collectible card game, and in collectible card games, there are decks that are good and decks that aren't. Yeah, and people die when they are killed. Regardless, what this means is that usually players will try to figure out the best deck of a game and then play it until a new expansion rolls out, meaning a whole new batch of cards for players to figure out the best deck. Generally, however, while the best decks in the meta will usually change over time, they usually get to have their place in the spotlight for at least a few months. In Legends of Runeterra, however, there was one deck that was shot dead almost as soon as it hit the scene. Patch 2.13. We're currently in the middle of the hellscape that is known as Bandle City, the 10th and final region of Legends of Runeterra, and also arguably the worst region of Legends of Runeterra, but that's a story for another time. We were getting 4 new champions: Rumble, a Yordle that was kind of forgettable; Pantheon, the Mantheon, who would also terrorize the game, but that's also a story for another time; Ahri, one of the most popular champions in League of Legends for, reasons; and lastly, Kennen, another Yordle that was also forgotten by Riot's story department, despite being kind of important to the lore. So, the whole premise of the Bandle City expansion was that every Yordle champion, except for one, would be a part of 2 regions, Bandle City and another region, and they were intended to be paired with a specific champion from that region, who'd essentially be a glorified parent to that Yordle. A lot of the old Yordles also got facelifted to get that double region deal. As for the whole parent thing, Nami got Fizz, Senna got Veigar, Caitlyn got the Hellspawn, and Seraph was supposed to get Ziggs, but Talia got custody of him in the divorce. He still had Mono Shurima though, so it wasn't a big loss for him. As for Kennen, he was supposed to be paired with Ahri, but we would soon find out that that was not going to be the case. So what was Kennen's deal? Well, Kennen's deal is that when summoned, he creates a free spell, Mark of the Storm, that creates a mark on a unit. If he blasted that unit with the very same spell, then said unit would take damage and get stunned. Kind of cool, but that spell could not be added to your deck, and the only way to get it was to summon Kennen. At least until he leveled up. Once he did, he would gain the ability to create that spell when he was summoned, attacked, or was blocked. Now, all of this is simple, but where it gets really interesting is looking at Kennen's level up condition. Summon the same unit 5 times. You can only put 3 copies of card in your deck, meaning if you wanted to level up Kennen, you were gonna have to do some shenanigans. So, just from the fact that Kennen was in the Jackass region along with Bandle City, the other Jackass region, it was pretty clear that the developers had a vision on how to play Kennen. Recall. What you were supposed to do was play Kennen, recall him back into your hand, and then play him again, repeating the cycle until you leveled him up. This makes sense when you remember that he was meant to be played with Ahri, a champion whose game plan revolves around recalls. Unfortunately, people saw another champion who would pair perfectly with Kennen. Ezreal is kind of a scourge on Legends of Runeterra, having been prevalent in almost every deck that people hate playing against, and no matter what kind of nerfs he received, he always keeps coming back. Karma Ezreal, Swain Ezreal, Twisted Fate Ezreal, 9 different versions of Seraphine Ezreal later down the line, but for now, it was Kennen Ezreal. Ezreal is a champion with a special ability that when he levels up, he will deal 2 damage to the enemy nexus if you cast a spell that targets an enemy unit. Mark of the Storm targets enemies. I think you can see where this is going. Fortunately, the concept was inhibited by the fact that you can only play 1 copy of a champion. See, when you play a champion, any copies of that champion in your hand will get turned into a champion spell, making it impossible to play another Kennen after you played the first, and Ionia's got a card that gives you 3 Kennens on the board. Yeah, while you can't play multiple copies of a champion, that doesn't mean you can't have multiple copies on the board. If you use the summoning effects of other cards, like say a card that creates a copy of a unit you recalled on the board, or a card that summons units straight from your deck, then it will be totally possible to get multiple copies of a champion. In fact, this concept is the entire backbone of several decks, and this concept became the linchpin to Kennen Ezreal's game plan. To play Kennen Ezreal, your job would be to level up Kennen as quickly as possible by cheating out multiple copies of him through cards like Kinku Wayfinder and Godwillow Seedling. Then you would use as many copies of Mark of the Storm you'd get to turbo level Ezreal and also gun down the enemy nexus. It was a very powerful and a very oppressive deck. For 7 days. Yeah, and only a week after the new expansion, the devs cranked out a hotfix that nerfed both Kinku Wayfinder and Godwillow Seedling, effectively killing the deck before it even lived. William Henry Harrison was president for longer than Kennen Ezreal was meta. Given how much people hate oppressive decks, you would think they would be happy with the choice that the devs made. However, there was actually some contention with this decision. One of the biggest criticisms about Legends of Runeterra was that nearly every deck in the game was pre-built. Remember how I talked about how every Yordle came with a parent? Well, nearly every champion in the past expansions had been designed to be paired with another champion. Nautilus was paired with Maokai, Diana was paired with Nocturne, Pyke was paired with Rek'Sai, Irelia was paired with Azir, yeah, that nightmare was an intentional pairing, and Twisted Fate was paired with Vi. Okay, so some pairings work better than others, but that's not the point. The point was that in Legends of Runeterra, you didn't really build decks, you optimized them. For a collectible card game, that's kind of annoying, but people still tried to build decks outside of the pre-built constraints, and we did get some pretty interesting ideas. Seeing how the devs let Irelia Azir run amok for months when they shot Kennen Ezreal between the eyeballs almost immediately after it became a thing was definitely a point of contention. Like, the devs were saying that it was okay for there to be oppressive decks as long as they were oppressive decks pre-built by the devs. Granted, a lot of people had an awful time playing against Kennen Ezreal and were probably just glad to see it kill before we got another Irelia Azir, and felt like the devs were finally taking steps in actually responding to player feedback in a timely manner. So is Kennen Ezreal a story of developers trying to force players to play their game a certain way, or developers responding to player criticism as quickly and succinctly as possible? I don't really have an answer for that. The deck would get a new lease on life later in patch 3.13 when Mark of the Storm got buffed, only to get nerfed again 3 patches later. Whatever the case, I like to think of Kennen as a champion similar to Karma and Seraphine. Champions who died for Ezreal's sins. So, thanks for watching, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for future videos, and I'll see you next time.